or welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about the topic staying home alone or staying in a separate room without my parents, and we want to give you a status quo about how that's going and also tell you about what's working for us right now. So in my last video about my parents did not expect that, we were talking about my problems with being alone and my separation anxiety, and that it's just like one of the things that I need to learn the most, and it's the most difficult for us. So in this video we want to show you what we've done so far and kind of reflect on our journey, because we've definitely have done some mistakes in the beginning, and we just want to share that with you guys so you can maybe do that in a better way with your puppy, or also learn from our learnings and our mistakes. And we're just going to share at the end of the video what tips are really helping us at the moment. So let's start with the status quo. And as most of you probably know, I moved in with my parents at the end of December, so a couple of weeks ago, and basically we spent all day, every day together because it were the days before Christmas and also over Christmas. So I was with my parents all the time and also with my parents' families. So it was just like lots of people, and we didn't really train for me to be alone at all, not even like for a few seconds. When my parents were in the bathroom, I always was with the other parent, or I even joined them. So yeah, I wasn't alone at all in the first 2 weeks. And I think after about 2 weeks, we started to train that I could stay home alone, and how my parents did it, because that's how they researched it and they read a lot of books, is that they would go to another room and leave me for a couple of seconds alone, and then they wanted to come back and pretend as if nothing has happened and everything is normal. But I basically started crying like the second they closed the door on me, and I couldn't even be alone for 2 seconds, and that was like so difficult for my parents. And they tried it a couple of times and really felt like, okay, this isn't really working for me at all. And I always started crying, and it was so hard for my parents and so disappointing, because there was basically no improvement. So my parents also didn't know how to build it up, because basically you're supposed to, or my parents are supposed to return to the room when I'm quiet and I'm not crying, but I didn't even stop crying for 1 second. So basically we just stopped training me being alone for even a couple of seconds, because it was so frustrating and they didn't know what to do. And so I got more and more clingy and more used to being around my parents all the time. Then a couple weeks later, around mid-January, when I was with my parents for 4 weeks or so, we started training being alone with snackies. And of course I loved that, because I'm basically food obsessed. So my parents used my favorite snackies, and then they put me in another room on a blanket, and I had my snack, and then I was in the room alone. And that was working so well for like 10 to 15 minutes, basically until I finished my favorite snack. And as soon as I finished, I was like starting to bark and starting to cry and to whine. And it was even worse than in the beginning, because since I was distracted, I didn't really realize that I was alone and it was all fine. But then since I finished my snack, I realized that I was alone, and it was even more terrible for me, because I was like being from this like calm and snacky situation up to like being alone and in like complete horror and in complete dissatisfaction with the situation. So that really didn't work at all. And we talked to also some of you guys that it's like basically just a distraction, and it doesn't really teach me how to be alone. So what we're doing again now is kind of like back to basics, and we're starting again with like closing the door on me and just like doing that 20 times a day or so, even more. So we're basically doing the scenario from the beginning. My parents just like leave the room, and then they do something in the other room, and then they come back. And that definitely works better than in the beginning. And I think my parents just like didn't have the patience to go through with it, because we can already see a little bit of improvement now, even after doing it only for a couple of days. And my mom can basically leave me in the other room for like 30 to 60 seconds, depending on other like circumstances, and she basically just like goes with me into one room and then does something in the room, and then she leaves without me. And most of the times I even like sit down and just like wait for her to come back. Then she comes back into the room and does something again, just like trying to pretend to get something out of the room, so that I don't realize that it's like a pretended situation for me. And she basically just ignores me, and that's very important, so that I don't realize that she praises me for being alone or something. And what's also important is that she only comes back into the room when I'm not crying or I'm not whining and I'm like a really quiet girl. And it's just so nice that the situation keeps on improving at the moment, and we're really just at the beginning, because we also tried that I would stay alone for a longer period of time. So my parents tried it for like 8 minutes at one point, and they just like left me alone with a blanket, something to bite, and then also like a sweater of my mom so I would smell something. And it didn't work at all. I was like literally crying and barking the whole time. And so my parents stopped it after like 8 minutes, so it wouldn't be like a traumatic experience, and it would make being alone even worse. And yeah, they just tried it in order to see whether I would calm down and realize, okay, my parents have always come back, they're gonna come back this time too. But yeah, that didn't work. So we're gonna do the baby steps scenario, which costs a lot of discipline and a lot of time and energy, because you literally have to do it like so many times a day that it becomes like boring to your puppy or your dog, and it's like the most normal thing in the world. And I mean, it's like good because it's working, but it's also just gonna take up so much time in order to really improve. And we're not really sure whether it's just like my own character, because I was talking to other poodle friends as well, and there are definitely poodles who can deal with being alone better, but there are also some who are definitely as stressed out as I am. And maybe it's just like about characteristics, and even though I'm like bad at being home alone, maybe I can do other stuff better. Or it's also because my parents didn't really start early enough training me and teaching me how to be on my own, also for just like a limited amount of time. We're not really sure, but I mean, we can change the past now, so that's just like what we're learning at the moment, and that's just our journey. So we definitely want to continue on learning and improving, and that's just like the status quo we wanted to give you and be really, really transparent about it. And even though we're not like pros, we definitely still want to reflect with you guys and want to give you also our tips as what we have learned so far. So the first tip we want to give you guys is to really just start early. And you can definitely just start after a couple of days after your puppy arriving at home, and after your puppy got used to the new place and to you guys as a parents. And since I really got used to my parents kind of too much, and to them being around all the time, because they both work from home and they just like leave the house for like meeting up with friends or like going grocery shopping or going to the gym. But other than that, they're always there. So we definitely would recommend to start the baby steps scenario early on, and just like to leave your puppy alone for a couple of seconds. And even though dogs are really used to being always around other dogs, or so even around their family, a few seconds are not normal. So it's very weird for us as humans to realize, okay, they're like so stressed out a bit about being alone for a couple of seconds. So you really have to be like more empathetic with your dog, and just like realize it's not a normal situation for the puppy, and it's normal for them to cry after like few seconds. And that just was my parents' mistake in the beginning, that they got too frustrated too fast and weren't patient enough. The second thing is that You should also train this when your puppy has fulfilled all their needs, so they don't have to go potty, they have drink something, they have eaten something, and they went for a walk, because the situation is already stressful enough, so they shouldn't have any additional needs or any additional stress on that. And the third thing is you should always come back when your puppy is quiet, and you should never come back into the room when your puppy is making any noise, because then I would think, okay, I'm making noise and now my parents are returning, so I should always make noise in order for my parents to return, and that's of course not the thing that we want to teach our puppies. So my parents always make sure to re-enter the room when I'm completely quiet, and I have been quiet for a couple of seconds, and you just have to use like good timing in order to do that. So then I realized I have to be quiet in order for me to see my parents again. And the fourth thing that also helped us is to just like set up an iPhone and to just record your puppy either with a video, or you can also do a FaceTime call if you have like 2 phones in your household, and then you can just like watch your puppy and see how it behaves, whether it's like really stressed out, because there's also differences about like being alone. Some are like just stressed out because they're anxious, and some are just like frustrated because they can't be with their owners at that point. Or you can also use a dog camera, especially designed for staying home alone, of course. And these were just like our tips and tricks, and even though we're just getting started, we felt like sharing them, because it's always good to exchange, and also for you guys maybe to realize you're not on your own if you're having troubles with your puppy staying home alone as well, because that's like what we're going through as well, and like what my parents have to learn a lot about as well. So, and we're also always up for new input, so if you have a comment, just leave a comment below and we can exchange our opinions, and we can also learn from you guys. And we definitely hope that being alone works better with your puppy, and I mean that's something that we can learn as well in the future. And of course I also want to give back my parents some freedom, for them to also leave the room or leave the house alone, for me to be alone for maybe an hour, so they can go and have dinner, just the 2 of them. And yeah, we'll just see how that's gonna work out in the future. And I would love for you guys to subscribe to my channel so you're not missing any upcoming videos. And I will see you next time.